The Hidden History of London, from Romans to Skyscrapers. Introduction. Layers of history beneath the modern world. London. When you look at it today, it feels like one of the most modern and dynamic metropolises in the world. Everywhere you look, you see double-decker buses, black taxis, flashing neon signs, and millions of people rushing somewhere. But let us pause for a moment. Let us look beyond the traffic, the concrete, and the modern buildings. Because this city is not just made of stone and asphalt. It is a living organism where layers upon layers of history are stacked on top of each other. Tonight, into a time machine together, we will follow, step by step, how this sprawling giant, now home to nearly 9 million people, grew from a tiny Roman settlement. London has survived so much. It has endured wars, invasions, terrible plagues, fires that turned the city to ashes, and, believe it or not, even a tornado. Yes, you heard that right. So just relax, make yourself comfortable, and let your mind drift as we explore the sleepy history of London together. Chapter 1. Rhinoceroses roaming Trafalgar Square? When you think of London, Trafalgar Square is probably one of the first places that comes to mind. Bustling with tourists, commuters, pigeons, and beautiful fountains. You might think it has always been this way. In reality, most of the architecture around the square, including the National Gallery, is not actually that old. They were built in the 19th century, but the ground beneath this area holds a past that is absolutely shocking. In the 1950s, during construction and excavation work right here in Trafalgar Square, workers dug deep into the earth. And what do you think they found? The ancient remains of cave lions, wild oxen, hippopotami, and rhinoceroses. Can you picture that? Approximately 120,000 years ago, during the last interglacial period, a massive rhinoceros roamed the exact spot where black taxis now wait at traffic lights and people sip their coffee. Absolutely surreal. Of course, the true history of London has to begin with its human inhabitants. Humans first arrived in Britain a very long time ago. Some evidence suggests as early as 800,000 BCE. But it took millennia for them to settle down permanently, transitioning from hunting and gathering to farming and domesticating animals. Gradually, scattered farming communities emerged in the London area, filled with sheep, cattle, and cart-pulling horses. But this was not a city yet. For a true city to be born, one of the greatest empires in history had to step onto these shores. Chapter 2. The Romans and Londinium. The years 43 to 47 CE. The Romans had just conquered Britain, and they needed a strategically located base near the river. They chose a perfect spot on the banks of the River Thames and named it Londinium. This is where the real story of London officially begins. Back then, Londinium was tiny, occupying a space of only about half a square mile. To put that into perspective, it was roughly the size of present-day Hyde Park. You could have walked from one end of the city to the other in about 30 minutes. But the Romans knew exactly what they were doing. Positioned at a low point of the Thames, it was incredibly easy to access by both land and sea, making it the ideal port and trading hub. Within a couple of centuries, the population expanded to 60,000 people. The Romans built grand structures, law courts, and civic institutions. They even built a massive defensive wall stretching for more than 2 miles to encircle the city, the London Wall. And here is the most fascinating part. If you visit London today, you can still see an impressive section of that original Roman wall standing near the Tower Hill tube station. Those stones are still there, quietly holding centuries of secrets. However, a recurring pattern began to shape London's destiny. Expansion, followed by disaster, followed by rebuilding and growth. In the late 2nd century, a major fire and a devastating plague swept through Londinium, causing the population to shrink significantly. And finally, in the year 410, as the Roman Empire faced its own collapse, they left Britain for good. Londinium fell into decline, its buildings fell into ruin, and the Great Walls became overgrown. The city fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 3. Anglo-Saxons and the Lost Trading Town. After the Romans left, new settlers arrived, Germanic tribes known as the Anglo-Saxons. Interestingly, they chose not to live inside the old Roman walls of Londinium. Perhaps the ruined stone city felt too ghostly for them. Instead, they settled just outside the walls to the west, creating a new town called Londonwick. the name meant London Trading Town. Centuries passed, and by the late 9th century, a new threat emerged: the Vikings. To protect the people from relentless Viking invasions, the Anglo-Saxon king, Alfred the Great, realized they needed proper defenses. They moved back inside the old Roman walls, refortifying them for protection. This new fortified center became known as Londonburg. Over time, the name was simplified, and it just became London. You probably remember the famous nursery rhyme from childhood, "London Bridge is falling down." Well, that song likely dates back to this very era. In the early 11th century, during a fierce attack led by Olaf II of Norway, the wooden London Bridge was completely destroyed. History has a beautiful way of surviving in the simplest songs. Chapter 4: Medieval London, Grandeur and Grime. In 1066, a massive turning point arrived. William the Conqueror became the King of England, marking the start of a whole new era. To show the locals who was in charge, he immediately began a major construction project: a fortified stone citadel to the east of the city. This was the White Tower, the very heart of what would become the legendary Tower of London. Over the centuries, it served as a castle, a royal residence, a notorious prison, and the home of the crown jewels. If you wanted to control England, you absolutely had to control the tower. The city was booming, outgrowing places like Rome and becoming one of the largest hubs in Europe. But let us be honest, living in medieval London required a strong stomach. The truth is, it was filthy. The narrow streets were filled with animal waste, and open sewers flowed directly into the River Thames. The smell from slaughterhouses and tanneries created an incredibly pungent atmosphere. Even though early laws were passed to stop people from throwing rubbish into the river, it remained polluted for centuries. This lack of sanitation eventually brought a catastrophic disaster. In 1348, the bubonic plague, known as the Black Death, struck the city. In London alone, there were as many as 200 deaths every single day. It took more than 150 years for the population to fully recover. Yet, London did not break. It bounced back. Chapter 5: The Theatre and Shakespeare, the Tudor Era. The Tudor period, especially the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, was a golden, prosperous time for London. The city was fast transforming into one of the most important commercial capitals in the world, trading with Europe, Russia, and even the Americas. The population skyrocketed from 50,000 to 200,000 inhabitants. Protestant refugees fleeing persecution in Catholic countries flocked to London, adding to its diverse fabric. But the best part of Tudor London? It offered an irresistible world of culture and entertainment. After work, people would gather in taverns for live music, join archery competitions, or watch intense bear-baiting matches. And most importantly, there was theater. Interestingly, the city authorities absolutely hated theater. They thought plays were immoral, attracted vagrants, and, worst of all, posed a public health risk for spreading the plague. Because of this, theatrical performances were completely banned within the city's jurisdiction. But theater companies found a loophole. They crossed the river and built their venues just outside the city borders. One legendary example is the Globe Theatre, built in Southwark in 1599. And who was writing the masterpieces performed there? A remarkably talented playwright living in London at the time, William Shakespeare. Chapter 6: The Great Fire and a City Risen from the Ashes. This brings us to perhaps the most dramatic couple of decades in London's history. In 1665, the Great Plague took a quarter of the city's population. Then, in September 1666, just as life was slowly returning to normal, a tiny spark changed everything. A small bakery on Pudding Lane caught fire in the heart of the city. At this time, London's layout was still completely medieval, a maze of narrow, winding alleys where bents and houses were made of wood with thatched roofs. The fire spread with terrifying speed and raged for several days. It gutted the city, leaving tens of thousands of people completely homeless. Samuel Pepys, the famous chronicler of London life, climbed a Kilsa steeple to look out over the smoldering ruins. He described it as the saddest sight of desolation he had ever seen. But as always, London proved to be resilient. In the aftermath, the city had to be completely rebuilt. The brilliant architect, Sir Christopher Wren, redesigned the city's landscape, including its crown jewel, the new St. Paul's Cathedral, built in a magnificent Baroque style. For more than 2 centuries, its majestic white dome dominated the skyline as the tallest building in the city. It stands today as one of London's most iconic landmarks. Chapter 7. The Capital of the World and the Big Smoke. By the time we reached the 19th century, Britain was at the absolute height of its imperial power, and London was the largest city in the entire world. Its staggering population growth was unlike anything seen before, exploding from 1 million to over 6.5 million people by the end of the century. But this global success came with a heavy, dark cost. London was nicknamed the Big Smoke because of its thick, choking atmosphere. Industrial pollution combined with millions of domestic coal fires covered everything in a layer of soot. The buildings, the grass, and reportedly even the sheep grazing in Regent's Park turned a dark, soot color. Charles Dickens captured this grim, foggy reality beautifully in his classic novels like Oliver Twist. With so many people packing into the city, street congestion became unbearable. The solution? Londoners did something completely pioneering. They built the world's very first underground metro system, known today as the Tube. Opening in 1863, this revolutionary train network laid the groundwork for modern transit systems all over the globe. Conclusion: looking to the future. In the 20th century, London endured the deep scars of 2 world wars and devastating bombing campaigns. Yet it stood tall. Today, nearly 9 million people call this city home, and more than 300 languages are spoken across its streets, making it one of the most culturally diverse places on Earth. Right next to the original Roman walls, soaring modern landmarks like the 95-story Shard now touch the clouds. It makes you wonder, what would the original inhabitants of Londinium think if they could see their home today? The brilliant lights of the West End, the gleaming skyscrapers, and the endless streams of traffic crossing the many bridges over the Thames. It would be completely beyond their wildest imaginations. London has undergone countless transformations over the centuries, rising from the ashes time and time again. Whatever extraordinary chapter comes next, the soul of this resilient city will keep moving forward. Thank you for wandering through time with me tonight. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more hidden history. Until next time, take care.